You'll know when you have a wild woman. She'll practice her craft without boundaries. She is truly autonomous.
Her loyalty is only to the family she serves, a midwife who will not allow herself to be held back by a system she didn't create.
This podcast is for the birthkeepers who want to grow and change. We are open to learning through self-reflection and supportive community. We are creating this space to explore without judgment. We are remembering we were
born wild. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Born Wild podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sophia. And today I have with me Amy, and she is going to share her birth story. Amy, will you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Odell. I am 35 years old and here to share with you my birth story about my firstborn, a daughter.
Beautiful. So my first question is usually always, where did your journey into motherhood begin? For some people, they always knew. For some people, it's the moment they found out they were pregnant. Some people have a really long conception journey. You know, where does your story begin?
The foundation of my birth story began 11 years ago.
Wow.
It was a warm, sunny day at Kings Beach in Lake Tahoe, California, and I had just finished playing volleyball. My new boyfriend at the time introduced me to his good friends from college. She gave birth to their son at home in a bathtub, he told me. Their 1-year-old son sat on a picnic blanket going to town on a fresh bag of red cherries. My thought was, that sounds so hippie. I did not imagine a round, deep, inflatable tub, but rather a standard-sized acrylic bathtub, like what I had bathed in as a child. My 24-year-old mind barely knew what a home birth was, let alone a midwife. Over the years, I grew to be fond of this woman, a registered nurse, who was so passionate about home birth. She opened my eyes to the benefits of an unmedicated birth. When you have an epidural, you can't feel the baby or when to push, which can lead to a host of problems, including increased risk of tearing, needing forceps or a vacuum to get the baby out. Epidurals can cause a drop in blood pressure, which can slow the baby's heart rate. A slower heart rate can turn into a baby in distress, which can lead to a call for a C-section. I learned about the snowball effect, or a cascade of interventions that tends to happen with childbirth intervention. One thing leads to another. She educated me about how movement and different positions progress labor, not laying in a hospital bed. I learned that a woman being on their back is the absolute worst position to be in for pushing a baby out, as gravity is working against the desired direction. Squatting or hands and knees, for example, is more conducive. Do you have any benefits of an unmedicated birth you would like to share? I'm sure you're better at articulating it than I am.
I mean, yes, definitely all the things you've said. The thing that I give a comparison to is that you can take the act of, intimacy, making love, sex with the same two people. And on one hand, it can be this loving, consensual, feel good, ecstasy experience. And then the same thing could be said for rape. The same two people, the same act, but it's fear and non-consensual, and like, it can be painful. There can be like physical trauma. It's like, how can you take the same two people in the same act and have two drastically different experiences? And it all comes down to like feeling safe and wanting the experience and like choosing it and calling it forward. And I think that's the same. A lot of people are like, how can you, like, what do you do for pain medication at home? And it's like, well, a lot of it is just that people are choosing this experience and choosing to stay home and who they're surrounding themselves with. And just in doing that, can experience a less painful birth.
Yeah, more empowered. It's what they want. They're more relaxed.
Yeah, freedom to move their body, be in their own space, eat their own foods, it's amazing what just that shift can do for pain management.
For sure. So empowered. And when we have choice in the matter, it makes the world a difference.
Yes.
I remember one time I asked my friend about the pain of birth. She said contractions felt like period cramps times 1,000. Stuck her fingers from both hands on the insides of each side of her mouth and pulled hard. She said that's what the ring of fire feels like. She assured me that this pain was pain with a purpose and that it was totally doable. Our bodies were made to do this. One time she showed me the video of her home birth with her son. The birth tub was round, deep, and inflatable. She laughed at herself, vocalizing her pain as she watched the video. My heart hurt for her, and I found it surprising that she could find her own pain humorous and her whole birth experience so joyous. Though I couldn't wrap my brain around it, I was convinced that this approach would be better for me and better for my baby if I ever had one. One evening, she invited me to her midwife's home to watch a video. I believe the movie was called Birth Story, Ina May Gaskin and the Farm Midwives, but I'm not sure. I remember.
Was it the business? Oh no, the business of being born was.
I don't think it was Business of Being Born. Oh, yeah. It was about Ina May Gaskin, but I wondered that too. I really should go back and watch it to see if that was indeed the one. But I remember there was this one birth story that really stuck out to me. It was a breech birth. The woman pushed out the baby butt first. I sat on the edge of my seat feeling nervous for her and felt sorry for her the whole time. After the event, my friend told me she appreciated that birth story because breech is one of her biggest fears. Over the years, I crossed paths with more people who had unmedicated births, some of which were home births. Everyone who had a home birth seemed to have a positive experience and be extremely passionate about the subject. So many people I knew who had hospital births with interventions seemed to have a negative, traumatic experience. They had to be induced, it was a long labor, it hurt so bad they can't imagine having ever done it without an epidural. Doctors had to use forceps, a vacuum. Their baby was in distress, so they had to have an emergency C-section, whatever. But none of those people who had home births had those issues. I saw a pattern. You can relax more in your own home than at a hospital, move around better, like you're saying, and attain different positions. At hospitals, there are people coming in and out of the room all the time. The lights are bright. You're wearing a monitor around your belly and have an IV in place. A home birth was officially on my bucket list. Do you have any more benefits of home birth that you would like to share? I'm sure you're able to articulate them better than I.
Yeah, I mean, speaking from a biased perspective, and then even my business partner, Leah, she always says, like, statistically speaking, home birth is safer for women. But yeah, benefits, I mean, besides the ones we already talked about in terms of pain reduction and pain management, is, like you said, the less likely experience of a cascade of intervention, starting from even before birth, where we have hour-long appointments, where we really get to know each other, because I feel like knowing your care provider sets you up for so much success, versus just, whoever's on call in the hospital and shift change and all that. But you're really feeling like you know them, is the starting point. And then just, having enough time to dig into nutrition and just like preventative care, making sure we are setting you up for success. And then all the way down to not fiddling with things that aren't broken, not trying to induce every other person who walks in our door, like really waiting for labor to start on its own and respecting that timeline is the starting point to not ending up needing this like cascade, needing in air quotes, cascade of intervention. I would say that's probably the biggest piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So fast forward to October 1st, 2022, I married the most wonderful man, my husband, John. Prior to our marriage, we had discussed children. Both of us wanted them, if it was meant to be. I mentioned I'd want to birth at home, unmedicated. He wouldn't want to get cavities filled without meds. and didn't think there was a need for me to give birth without meds, but he would support whatever I wanted. I had doubts that we'd ever get pregnant, and we weren't pregnant at that time, so I didn't see a point in saying much more than that. We agreed we wanted to enjoy 1 year of marriage, just the two of us, before trying to add a baby to the mix. In the summer of 2023, we listened to the Huberman Lab podcast, How to Optimize Fertility in Males and Females. Since sperm can take up to 90 days to mature, John stopped going in the hot tub in our backyard in June. We both refrained from drinking alcohol for the quality of his sperm and the number, quality, and implantation success of my eggs. I figured we may struggle with fertility like many of my friends, especially since my mom had a difficult time getting pregnant with her first, my older brother, due to endometriosis, and I probably had it too. Per my request, John and I started trying in September, just a little ahead before our 1 year anniversary on October 1st. I wanted a little head start. I was 34 years old and not getting any younger. It didn't work. On October 5th, I started my period. We were at a wedding in Carmel that weekend for one of my horse polo teammates from college. And after 3 months of no alcohol, I decided to enjoy a couple drinks. I thought for sure we would never get pregnant. And if I did, I for sure wasn't pregnant then. Just like I suspected. The week of October 16th, we got new flooring in our home. To make it easier to move the furniture, the contractors had removed our bedroom door. We had 3 housemates at the time, but the ovulation pea stick from Target told me I was ovulating. And I said to John, we're doing this, even though we don't have doors. On Tuesday, Halloween Day, I took a pregnancy test and it was positive. I was shaking with disbelief and excitement as I donned yellow bumblebee wings and antenna for my Halloween costume to wear to work. I do therapy with children, with horses, so I wanted to dress up and be fun. I walked over to John's home office, sat on his lap as he sat in his spinny office chair, and shared that he was going to be a dad.
Cute.
We have excellent insurance through John's job with the state of California. I saw a general practitioner on November 6th who confirmed my pregnancy and referred me to an OBGYN. After a 2-week vacation with friends to Vietnam, which I battled morning sickness, we had our first OB appointment on December 4th. John never missed attending a prenatal appointment with me. I shared with him how my dream was to have an unmedicated home birth. John said, we have UC Davis, one of the best hospitals in the area. He felt a hospital birth was safest. We also looked into it, and since we have an HMO, our insurance wouldn't cover a home birth anyways. Prenatal care with an OB and a hospital birth would be 100% covered. No deductible or copay even. We could have switched our insurance plan to a PPO in November, and we might have been able to get some reimbursement for a home birth, but it never had crossed our minds. While driving to Tahoe for skiing, I suggested we listen to a podcast about home birth versus hospital birth. John's request was that it would be non-biased. So I did a search and pulled up one that I hadn't listened to before. And it ended up being a story about a woman who needed a C-section. And she was so glad she was at a hospital because her son probably would have died if it weren't for them being at a hospital. Epic fail. Deep inside, I knew this wasn't so. It was the cascade of interventions that led to her C-section and our unnecessary high rate of C-sections in the United States. Do you happen to know what percentage of births in the United States are C-section, by the way, Sophia?
It really depends on the location. It can be, our average in our area, which we're like Sonoma County, Marin, is about, 25 to 33%. Depending on the hospital, but I've heard that there are some hospitals in Florida that are can be between 50 and 80%.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's some countries like Brazil that it's above 90%.
Dang. It's how could that be? If you let nature take its course, that percentage of people wouldn't die in childbirth. It just doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, the World Health Organization recommends that C-section rate is less than 10%.
Wow.
Yeah, which most home birth midwives probably have that rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and countries where midwifery is for low risk, like all the women, unless you're high risk, you go to the hospital. Usually their C-section rates are more in line.
Yeah. So thankfully, my husband is very open-minded and listened to some other podcasts that showcased the benefits of unmedicated birth and home birth. At a friend's wedding on January 1st, we spoke to a couple who had all three of their very well-behaved and polite children at home with a midwife in Florida.
Mm.
She explained to us how home births are actually safer than hospital births. She said, once you arrive at a hospital in labor, a clock starts. If your labor doesn't progress quickly enough for them, they put you on Pitocin. Pitocin makes your contractions hurt 10 times worse, which typically leads to you wanting an epidural. An epidural leads to a host of other interventions. Her husband spoke to mine, man to man. I was thrilled. John became open to looking into hiring a midwife or a doula to come with us to the hospital, one or the other. He agreed to tour a local birth center. He felt more comfortable with the idea of a birth center than a home birth. On January 8th, we had a tour scheduled at a birth center 7 minutes away from our home, immediately followed by an OB appointment the same day. I asked the gal who gave us the birth center tour questions like, what are the benefits of an unmedicated birth? And about the safety of the birth center birth. She said, well, it sounds like you already know all the benefits. But I wanted my husband to hear what she had to say because she was a different person than me. I wanted him to hear it from someone else. She was less than convincing about the safety and rabbit trailed about issues with California law around midwifery care. Like if I were to go past 42 weeks, I would need to deliver at a hospital anyways, and we would still be out the $8,400.
Oh,
I
goodness.
could sense my husband's uneasiness when we left the birth center and headed straight to our OB appointment. John encouraged me to ask my OB about all the things I wanted in a home birth: delayed cord clamping, intermittent monitoring, eating, drinking water, etc. And that I did. The doctor assured me that of course they would do delayed cord clamping because that is research proven. But I believe they only delay it for about 30 to 60 seconds because that's what a study shows. Do you know if that's true, Sophia?
That's pretty standard in the hospital. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't wait until the cord stops pulsating, right?
Right.
Yeah. I shared with the doctor that I didn't want an epidural. She said that contractions are extremely painful and I would for sure want the epidural. She got an epidural with both of her kids as soon as she felt her first contraction.
Wow.
She said epidurals reduce tearing because the urge to push is very strong when there is no epidural, and some women push too hard and tear. I brought up how I didn't want Pitocin. She told me that Pitocin reduces the rate of C-sections according to studies. I told her I didn't want to wear a monitor around my belly the whole time. She happily told me about a couple cordless monitors that they have that would allow me to move around the room. And I've heard that these aren't always available, by the way.
True.
I asked about eating and drinking during labor. She assured me that I could eat prior to 4 centimeters and that after 4 centimeters, I would be throwing up and I wouldn't want to eat anyways. Trust her. I left the doctor's office in tears, and John on cloud 9, totally assured that I could have the birth I was wanting at UC Davis Hospital. I was devastated, but trying to remain open-minded, be reasonable about finances, and compromise. Do you have any thoughts about my OB's response?
I mean, I'm just glad she was honest with you, because sometimes they can say that they're going to do all sorts of things, but not go into detail about it, and then don't provide any of it. At least she was honest about the use of Pitocin and how she feels about it all, that it is helpful and that she did it. Because some people feel like they're lied to and they're promised all these things and then they get none of it.
That's a good point.
Yeah. But it sounds like she was setting you up for a very typical hospital birth,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
you
I
knew
did
wasn't what
not
you
want
wanted.
that. Yep. I, with a passion, did not want that. On January 26th, I contacted my a doula that my friend recommended. She had spoke very highly of her services at her hospital birth, even though she ended up getting an epidural, which just confirmed my desire not to birth at a hospital.
Mhm.
My husband and I spoke to this doula on February 2nd over the phone. Unlike the lady at the birth center, this woman was a powerhouse, confident, passionate, able to articulate the benefits of unmedicated birth and home birth. She'd been working in birth for over 25 years. Turns out she's now an unlicensed midwife and offers birthkeeper services.
Mhm.
So people don't want a midwife, but they want somebody skilled around. They want to kind of do a free birth, but maybe have somebody there just in case. She
Mhm.
also still works as a doula, but doesn't doula for hospital births anymore because it's so much more difficult for the client to succeed in a hospital setting. She seemed incredibly skilled. If she was a licensed midwife and didn't live 3 to 4 hours away from us, my husband and I would have hired her in a heartbeat. She kindly emailed me a list of licensed midwives in my area that she recommended. I responded to her email the next day. Thank you so much for taking the time to send this list. My husband and I greatly appreciated your time, knowledge, and resources. Since talking to you on the phone, my husband has seemed the most comfortable with the idea of a home birth I've ever seen. I think it's because you are so knowledgeable and well-spoken on the phone. Prior, he was expressing he prefer we deliver at a hospital because it's safer and so forth. My dream of a home birth looks promising now. A few days ago, we watched the movie Orgasmic Birth. While having dinner with some friends on Saturday night, he told the couple we're going to do a home birth.
Mm.
I was shocked. We reached out to the licensed midwives the birth keeper had recommended and interviewed 3 of them. Captivated by one's longevity of experience, calm, patient presence, and reasonable maximum of 5 births per month, we chose this one who lived just 15 minutes away from us. I was 19 weeks along, and we had our first appointment with her on February 19th. I told her how my mom was a hobby photographer and she would attend the birth and take photos.
Hmm.
We loved the amount of time this midwife spent with us during prenatal visits, valued her knowledge, and appreciated her detailed care. John came to every single one of my appointments. When we talked about how the midwife would provide a birth tub, she mentioned hers was blue, but someday she'd like to get one of those pretty white ones.
Hmm.
I later wrote to her and asked if she would consider getting one of those white ones before my birth. I told her she would be welcome to use the photos my mom would take for her marketing. Throughout my pregnancy, John and I educated ourselves about natural birth with literally hundreds of podcasts, mostly from Down to Birth, some from Birthing Instincts, and a few others. Several of the podcasts were about breech birth. I read the book Spiritual Midwifery. John read The Birth Partner and We're Pregnant, First Time Dad's Pregnancy Handbook. We both read Hypnobirthing, The Morgan Method. John quickly became probably one of the most educated and prepared dads to be.
Hmm.
I didn't want ultrasounds, but we opted to get the 20-week anatomy scan. That's when we became first aware that our baby was breech, though it was early and not a concern at that time. At 31 weeks, she was still breech, and our midwife gave us a list of breech position tips. I wasn't worried because I knew there was still time for her to turn, but I wanted to be proactive. I did spinning babies exercises multiple times per day. I saw a massage therapist who specializes in creating space for babies to turn and saw her a total of 6 times. And that was almost $1,000. And so
Whoa.
now our free hospital birth has turned into $7,000 midwife service,
Mhm.
plus almost $1,000 in massages.
Mhm. Yeah.
I saw a chiropractor 3 times, 3 different midwives, did massage to encourage my baby to turn, a total of 5 attempts with no success. One midwife, with one midwife, the baby's heart rate dropped to 102 beats per minute and then recovered back into the 130s. I had a failed ECV with Tributaline at UC Davis Hospital in Sacramento at 37 weeks. The baby's heart rate plummeted into the 60s when they turned her 90 degrees, so they stopped. The baby's heart rate quickly recovered, but they didn't attempt again due to the deceleration.
Mm-hmm.
And in my chart, the doctor wrote, patient was strongly counseled against attempting any vaginal breech birth with any provider willing to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. Our experience getting the ECV was actually quite traumatic for both my husband and I. So originally we went on a Friday and they did all the testing and prep for about an hour. And then we were completely neglected for 3 hours and nobody came in our room. And we just waited because we could overhear in the room next door that they were very busy. A woman came in labor and they asked her to get on the scale. I could hear in the hallway. They're like, ma'am, step on the scale. And she wouldn't. And she was moaning through her contractions. And I'd watched thousands of birth videos. So I could tell in her sounds that she was pushing. And she was refusing to get on the scale. And they were really pressuring her to be weighed and stand on the scale. Then they finally got her in the bed in the room next to me. And I heard the nurse yell, head is out, I need help. And the baby was born right then. And people were racing around and then they whisked the baby away to the NICU. And I remember I went by her room to go to the restroom and I could see her with her legs spread out and blood everywhere. And I went back in my room and I just was traumatized by overhearing this whole experience. And I could hear her name and her date of birth and all of this information. It wasn't private at all. And then we were completely neglected for 3 hours. And then finally my husband went and asked if we were still going to be seen. And they were like, I'm sorry, we're so busy. Can you come back another day? So after 4 hours, we left the hospital without having had the ECV. And we were so mad because we still had to pay $16 for parking.
Oh God. Yeah. It's all adding up.
Yeah. Then we were supposed to go camping that weekend and we did, but we had to come back early because they rescheduled the ECV for Monday. So we were going to be camping until like Tuesday, but we came back Sunday night because we had the ECV at like 7 o'clock in the morning or something that Monday. So we went back to UC Davis, had the ECV for real that time, and they scared us with like, oh, you might have to have a C-section. You know, if the baby's heart rate plummets, like we might have to put you in an emergency C-section. And there were all these professionals everywhere. And there were about 12 students because UC Davis is a teaching hospital. So there were like 15 people in the room, multiple OBs, like 3 OBs. There was an anesthesiologist ready to, help with a C-section. It was so scary because I did not want a C-section, but I wanted my baby to turn so that I could have a vaginal birth.
Mm-hmm.
So there was just so much pressure to try this ECV. And I actually had a lot of faith in the ECV because I was breech in my mom's belly in 1989. And my mom had a successful ECV at Kaiser, Sacramento at 39 weeks and 6 days. So the day before her due date, the day before my due date, she had an ECV. And then I stayed and was born 1 week after my due date.
Wow. Mother like daughter.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. My mom had a breech baby, although her other baby, my brother, was not breech, her first one. And here I'm having my first baby breech. And so, yeah, I wondered if there was any kind of genetic component there, but I had turned in my mom's belly. So I thought, well, my baby will probably turn and stay too. So I had a lot of faith in the ECV, but like I said, her heart rate plummeted. This whole process was like 20 seconds. They tried to turn her so fast, so hard, and then they just stopped and were like, we're not going to try again because of the heart rate plummeting.
Mm.
And it was very odd to us because we had been through similar maneuvers when midwives had tried to encourage her to turn with massage. So we were very familiar with these maneuvers on my belly, and the midwives did them so much more gently and slowly. And these OBs just went really hard, really fast, and then threw in the towel.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about my experience?
I mean, that's pretty typical from what I've heard is, at the hospital, either using a lot of drugs or epidural, so that they can use a lot of force. But midwives tend to be a little more gentler. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it just depends on every hospital's policy and protocol. And yeah.
Yeah, and the midwives were a lot more successful in almost turning her. They turned her much further,
Mhm.
and at times much further with no heart rate decel.
Yeah, it's like slow and steady wins the race kind of thing.
Yeah, her heart decelerated the most with the hospital ECV.
Yeah, that makes sense with more force.
Yeah. So we tried all these things and it was getting closer and closer to my due date. We didn't know what to do. Our midwife was asking us, what are your plans? And I told her, I don't freaking know. I don't know what to do. I don't want a hospital birth. I don't want a C-section. The doctors were saying that the only option was a C-section. UC Davis does not attempt vaginal breech births. So I was looking into other hospitals that would attempt a vaginal breech birth. I heard there was a doctor or two in my area who would attempt them, but there was no guarantee that they would be on shift when I would go into labor. And I learned that I could show up at any hospital and they wouldn't be able to turn me down, but I wouldn't be able to see these doctors prenatally and visit with them about my situation beforehand. I could only show up and hope that one would be on shift.
Yeah.
So that felt really stressful. I called UCSF because some of their doctors are trained in vaginal breech birth, but I was too far along. I would have had to be receiving prenatal care with them prior to 36 weeks and have established care, and it would have to be very planned, and they would have to check all these boxes and do certain scans and measure the head circumference and all this in order to attempt that with me. If I were to just show up, they wouldn't have been able to take me.
Mm.
I looked into Marin General. So all of those just felt really uneasy and unsure. And I figured I would probably end up showing up to a hospital and then it would end up being a C-section.
Yeah.
So then we were met with the decision of, okay, would we do a scheduled C-section or an emergency C-section? My midwife was recommending that I labor at home, that I go into spontaneous labor because there's a lot of benefits to that, and labor at home until maybe 5 centimeters to be able to get the hormones and reap a lot of the benefits of natural labor, and then go into the hospital and have a C-section. But hospitals call that an emergency C-section, and I might need to be knocked out completely. There's no guarantee that I would be able to stay awake for the C-section. And emergency C-sections are sometimes more rushed and maybe not as good of an experience or possibly not as good of quality. So that made me feel concerned. And I just couldn't imagine laboring at home and trying to relax and be comfortable and happy and just knowing that I would need to get in the car and have a major surgery. I just couldn't wrap my brain around that. It sounded so stressful. And how would I be able to relax through the contractions at home? And why would I want to, just knowing I was doomed for a C-section anyways?
Mhm. So stressful.
So stressful. And the idea of a scheduled C-section, I didn't like either because they wanted to schedule her to be born at 39 weeks. I wanted her to come when she was ready. I wanted her to bake as long as possible. And I just didn't love the idea of not allowing my body a chance. I wanted to attempt a natural birth.
Mhm.
So these C-section choices didn't sit well with me either. My midwife had mentioned that I could drive to Idaho and see a midwife there. I could drive to Nevada and see a midwife there. My husband and I felt uncomfortable with traveling, when I'm in labor and just kind of doing this naughty thing and it being so wrong to do in California that I would need to travel out of state.
Yeah.
My midwife,
That's one of the most wild things to me, is that you can just jump state borders and something not be illegal, and then jump back and it be illegal,
right.
without any change in, like, there's a study that shows that it's safer to do in Idaho versus California.
Yeah. And what would my friends think of that and family think of that I needed to travel out of state to give birth to my baby?
Yeah.
They would think I'm crazy. They already thought
It
I was
defeats the
crazy.
whole point of home birth, where you're like staying in your environment where you're comfortable. Like, the first step is staying put. You're not traveling.
Exactly. The thought of having to drive to Reno or LA or, well, LA for, I didn't mention that, doctors that would attempt a vaginal breech birth in LA. I looked into that also. But yeah, the thought of traveling anywhere when I was in labor did not sound peaceful.
Yeah.
So my midwife made it clear that she couldn't attend our birth if it was breech, because her license would be on the line, which we completely understood. She's the breadwinner for her family. So if she were to lose her license, it would really impact her family financially.
Mm-hmm.
She believed in breech vaginal birth. She wanted in every bone in her body to attend my birth, but in order to protect herself, couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that there was an option to hire another midwife in California, but we were deterred from this originally by the money, because we were already so deep in the cost of not just the midwife, but all the things we did to try to encourage baby to turn, that hiring another midwife seemed irresponsible financially. And it's illegal for midwives in the state of California to attend a breech birth. So that made us feel nervous. We did talk to you and Leah over the phone. And we talked to some other midwives, and we learned about options where some licensed midwives might agree to attend our home birth, but then if we needed to transfer to the hospital, they wouldn't be able to go with us in order to protect their licenses, which we completely understood. We learned about a certified nurse midwife who had experience with breech births, three or four breech births, and had training with Dr. Stu and protocols from him. And she felt that it was legal for her to attend a home birth in the state of California because of these protocols and supervision from the OBGYN, who is licensed in California, and because she's a certified nurse midwife. Some other midwives feel the law is gray, but to her, she felt it was very clear and that she wouldn't be doing anything wrong. And she felt so confident in that she was willing to actually submit a claim to our insurance so that we could try to get reimbursed for out-of-network home birth.
So great.
Yeah. We spoke to her on the phone on July 5th, and my due date was July 9th. She was so confident and so knowledgeable. She really convinced us to do it. My husband felt confident. We talked to her about what she would do in certain situations. She was trained in all the different breech maneuvers. She felt it was perfectly safe. She talked about how bad the term breech study is, and that she feels breech is safe if the provider is trained in the maneuvers. And a lot of doctors aren't trained in breech vaginal birth and the maneuvers. So it's really not safe. and it can be less safe at a hospital, especially if they're not trained in the maneuvers. Do you
Well,
want to talk
yeah,
about?
I wanted to speak on that because we also did training with Dr. Stu because also you never know if there's going to be a surprise breach.
Right.
And one of the things he said is that that is just such BS, the whole like doctors claiming that they're not trained, because he said it's pretty much the same maneuvers to get a breech baby out vaginally that needs help as it is to get a breech baby out by cesarean. He said it's pretty much the same set of maneuvers that you would do, except that with a cesarean, you could always like make the opening bigger if you needed to. But he's like, so they already know what to do. They're just choosing not to do it vaginally.
Yeah. Can you speak to the term breech study at all?
That, I mean, I have like a link to it and I've read it a couple times. It's not something that I retain in my brain. I have to like reread it every time I want to talk about it. I can't give you any details on it.
That's okay. My understanding is that 1 in 1,000 head down babies suffer from lack of oxygen to the brain, and 2 out of 1,000 breech babies suffer from lack of oxygen to the brain. And the way they word it is it's double the risk. But
Right.
if you
Like a
look at the
50%,
numbers,
yeah, 50% increase where you're like, oh my God, which is true, but it's the whole like relative versus absolute risk.
yeah, and the study was done with doctors who weren't trained in breech vaginal birth, and it was done in the 80s, I believe, or the 90s, something like that.
Yes,
And
that
so,
sounds about right.
yeah, they really need to redo some research, and it's one study, and it's not a good study. They really need to look into this and do more research about it, because if the person is trained in the right maneuvers, we believe it can be safe.
Right. And that they
Very
want
safe
to
and
be there in
effective.
the first place and do it, you know. We had transported to the hospital with a client once whose baby was breech, and she was just like, okay, I'm going in and I'm gonna have a C-section. She had kind of resolved herself to that. And the doctor there gave her the choice to have a vaginal breech birth, which kind of caught us all off guard. We were like, oh, okay, let's talk about this. But the doctor was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do a vaginal breech birth, but I want you to have all your choices. You deserve to have that choice if you want it. And the mom opted to have a C-section for a lot of different reasons. But one of them was she's like, do I really want to do this with someone who doesn't want to do it? Like she wanted somebody who was, trusted it and felt it was safe and was on board. And that doctor was like, I don't feel that this is the safer option for you. And if you want it, we'll do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thankfully, this certified nurse midwife we spoke to, she wanted to do it and felt so sure, so confident that she really convinced us. And we agreed to pay an extra $3,000 for an a la carte midwifery service on top of our other one. However, we didn't sign the paperwork with her that day because we were going to try to encourage baby to turn one more time on Sunday the 7th. And I had a lot of hope in that. I was still remaining very optimistic. And we figured I would be late because this was my first baby. I felt super comfortable, wasn't having any symptoms. I wasn't totally huge. So I thought for sure she would be arriving later than my due date. And I had time to do all this. My husband and I love to host parties, and we didn't plan a 4th of July party ahead of time because we weren't sure how it would feel and if we would want to do that. But on July 5th, we decided, you know what, we think this baby's going to stay in for a while. Let's have a party on Saturday the 6th to celebrate 4th of July weekend. So we had a big party that night. I woke up Saturday morning, the 6th at 5:45, which is very early for me, super energized. And it was a very hot day, I think 104 degrees or something like that. So I decided, you know what, this is a good time to get out of bed and start working outside and pulling weeds, mowing the lawn, edging the lawn, hosing the furniture in the backyard to get ready for the party. I'm always very motivated to do things that I should do anyways at my house before a party when guests come. So I worked very hard all day Saturday physically, and it was very hot outside. And that evening we had over 30 people at our house, and we had only planned the party with like a day's notice. And we had all these people come. They were swimming, kids were flipping into the pool. It was wildly fun. We stayed up until about 2 a.m., cleaned up, went to bed. And at 7 a.m. on Sunday, the 7th, I woke up to some period-like cramps and low back pain. But I thought, well, I don't really know. It could be nothing. Maybe it's from all the yard work I did the prior day. But I told John, I said, hey, just so you're aware, I'm having some period-like cramps and low back pain. We had our last hypnobirthing class at 9 a.m. and it was actually at our house. The lady came privately to our home for the class, which was really nice. And this was the last one. She knew about our breech situation and had tried to be supportive throughout the process. She suggested I dive for quarters at the bottom of my swimming pool, which I had done. She was planning on doing like some C-section hypnobirthing prep work to like help me relax during the C-section. I did not want to do that because I did not want a C-section. So here she comes to our house at 9 a.m. I had been laying in bed just uncomfortable with the cramps. And so I got up at like 8:55. I did not brush my teeth. I did not eat breakfast, did not wash my face, did not brush my hair. I grabbed the 4th of July dress that I was wearing the night before near me and threw it on. It was strapless. It had American flags all over it. It was comfy, which is why I wanted to put that on. I walked down the stairs, sat on the couch, told the hypnobirthing instructor what was going on. And as we practiced the hypnobirthing breathing, I would place my hand on my lower back every time I felt a wave to inform the instructor and my husband. And we would practice all of the breathing and the exercises during those feelings. The hypnobirthing instructor walked herself out of our house around 10:30 a.m. and I went upstairs and laid down on my bed. I started timing my contractions with an app and taking screenshots and sending them to my original midwife and the new prospective midwife, certified nurse midwife that we hadn't signed paperwork or paid yet or met yet. And the doula, who I haven't even mentioned yet, there was an opportunity to have a midwifery student doula at my birth for free in exchange for the experience. Turned out she didn't really need the hours, but she had said she would do it. So she was wonderful and followed through. And she was super nice and actually had met with me during my pregnancy and tried to do some body ready stuff with me to try to help the baby turn. She was wonderful. Anyways, so I informed all 3 of these people. My original midwife was like, why are you telling me you're in labor? I'm not your midwife anymore. You need to be contacting your new, certified midwife, though she did agree to attend as an assistant, which was wonderful.
Awesome.
Absolutely wonderful. Yeah. So she was still a part of my birth and I love her dearly. So at this point, I was advised to stop timing my contractions by my doula, which I did. And John and I had remembered from our original midwife advice to rest when we started labor, because in early labor, you should sleep as much as possible because you don't know how long labor is going to be. And a lot of times people get excited and they start doing the different positions and everything, but it takes a really long time. It can. So you should rest if you're able to. And both of us had been up really late with the party we hosted. So we both took a nap and I slept between contractions and woke up a little bit for the waves and then went back to sleep. And my husband was caring for me. He started doing laundry. He was doing some work for his job to prepare for the next day, which was a Monday that he was going to be out of the office. He was like scheduling some emails to send. He was filling out all the paperwork for the new certified nurse midwife, which I should have filled out ahead of time, but didn't because I was just sure that we were going to turn the baby that Sunday night. So he's running around, and then every time I had a wave, he would come over and say some of the hypnobirthing lines and say things like, "You're halfway through, you're on the back end of it now." And he was
Okay,
really great.
multitasking man.
Yeah, yeah, he was amazing, incredible. And we happened to have a Doppler at our house because of the plans to try to encourage baby to turn that evening. So he was actually checking the baby's heart rate for the birth team. And the certified nurse midwife had just come from a 3-day birth that resulted in a transfer to a hospital for a C-section, and she was exhausted. So she went home to sleep. And so my husband was really doing everything because she needed to rest, understandably. The let's see, my water broke around 6 p.m. and my husband got towels. And then around 9 p.m., the doula came and she was so helpful. My husband said if he had $500 cash in his pocket, he would have given it to her. That's how helpful she was. She allowed him to go downstairs and eat some dinner, and she was just amazing. I remember when she walked in the room and I could hear her voice that was familiar to me. It was soft, and she placed her hand so gently on my arm. I loved it. And I knew she was there. I didn't open my eyes and look at her or greet her. I knew she would understand. And she was just there. Her presence filled the space.
Beautiful.
We had our smart bulbs turned to a turquoise color. John had calming music playing on our Alexa. The room was pretty dark. And this whole time I had just been on my bed all day, which is so opposite to what I was planning. I thought I would be walking and sitting on a ball and going up and down stairs and doing different positions. Nope, I just wanted to be in bed. I remember I had wanted to braid my hair and I had a certain swimsuit and certain outfits picked out for my birth. We were going to have a tub, but we didn't have a tub because the original midwife was no longer our midwife. She was just the assistant. And the certified nurse midwife had a birth kit for us to order, but we hadn't, I think we ordered it maybe, or I don't know if we ordered it, but it hadn't come yet. So we didn't have all the supplies for the home birth. Oh my gosh, this happened earlier than I expected. We weren't ready and we had been so busy with all of this breech research. Oh, I forgot to mention, I had reached out to a nonprofit called Breech Without Borders, and the president emailed me back with like all these resources, doctors in the area, all the stuff that was super helpful. And also there's a Facebook group called Coalition for Breech Birth. And I had found that and read a bunch of those posts. I had posted myself and asked for advice, and a whole slew of people commented, encouraging me to pursue the midwife route and still seek a vaginal birth. It was so helpful to have all these resources. I was really polling a lot of people. I had a friend I worked with who had a sister who's a midwife and was practicing here in California, but recently moved to a different country. And I reached out to her on Instagram and she was so kind and responded and gave me all this encouragement and ideas. And, all of this really added up to the whole puzzle of finding out that we wanted to do a home birth. So anyways, back to the birth. The doula is there. It's 9 o'clock. And then the certified nurse midwife arrives around midnight. And I had never met her before, which my husband and I thought was kind of funny. But then as we thought about it later, we realized, well, a lot of people have not met the OB who ends up delivering their baby at the hospital.
Yes. I know.
So
I
it's
think
really,
the only piece that feels a little different is having somebody in your home,
Mhm.
But yes, that is very true. And another thing I'm
True.
thinking of too is just that, like, it just goes to show that babies just don't really care if you're ready or not. They're gonna
Mhm.
come anyways.
Exactly. And we don't know if she would have come then anyways, if I hadn't done all that yard work, or if it was all the squatting, pulling weeds that initiated it. We're not sure,
It's
but
always the last thing you did before you had your baby that was the thing.
yeah, you never know what it would have been otherwise. So midnight, and the certified nurse midwife comes in the master bedroom. At this point, the doula had persuaded me to move to the shower. So I was in the shower, buck naked on my hands and knees, doing really well. The shower was super helpful. And the certified nurse midwife introduced herself to me, and I said, "Hi, I'm Amy. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here." I was actually able to get out some words, which was impressive in between contractions. And she asked if she could check me, and I said, "Sure." And I was 9 centimeters dilated.
Oh my gosh.
I was so relieved. I figured I was just because I had watched so many videos, but I was still relieved. And I asked her, "Do you think we can have this baby here, or will I need to transfer to the hospital?" Because I knew that that was an option. And she told me that she couldn't, answer that question, of course. And then around 12:30 a.m., my original licensed midwife came to assist, and she would have come earlier, but she was waiting for the certified nurse midwife to come first, because if she had gotten there first and then I had the baby, she didn't want to be in a bind
Mhm.
to act as the provider. So she would have come earlier, she said, but that's okay. And they all were so wonderful. They were spraying rose water in my face. They tried a TENS machine on my back because I was having a lot of back labor, back pain as she was coming down. They moved me out of the shower. Later, my husband told me that the room was like super hot and steamy. I didn't even realize that. It was like a 104-degree day. They moved me to my bed, and I remember they had like all these towels and puppy pads all over the bed because we didn't have the birth kit, so we didn't have the mattress protector thing or anything. They
All
had
right.
puppy pads all over, like around the bed. I was impressed. And I remember thinking, why are there no pillowcases on our pillows? I guess my husband didn't want the pillowcases to get ruined, so there were all these like unpillowcased pillows everywhere. And they were wonderful. They were all just so relaxed and confident. There was so much peace in the room. I had wanted my mom to be at my birth originally, but because of the breech situation, a lot of our family and friends were really concerned about me seeking to still do a vaginal breech birth, and they were really trying to comfort me with a C-section being okay, and that ultimately I just should want what was best for my baby. So we had made the decision to just not have anybody at our birth that wasn't a professional member of the birth
Which is
team.
so hard for somebody to say that
Yeah.
basically they feel like you're being selfish, when really that's the last thing you're being, because we know that a vaginal birth is better for babies.
Yeah. Do you want to go into some details on that?
I mean, in general, vaginal birth is better for babies. Even just experiencing labor, they did a study where babies who were born by C-section that experienced labor or never experienced labor, like a scheduled C-section, that
Mhm.
babies do better in general, specifically with their breathing when they've experienced labor. So that can always be a little cathartic for women who labored and ended up in a C-section, because sometimes that can feel like all of that for nothing, but it wasn't for nothing. Like, it did prepare your baby and give them a better shot when they were born by C-section. But yeah, it just is better. Not to mention that you aren't recovering from major surgery.
Yeah. Can you
It's
talk
better
about?
for babies too. Like having a mom
Mhm.
who's not recovering from major surgery is better for babies.
Absolutely. Is it true that breastfeeding tends to go better for babies and moms who had a vaginal birth versus a C-section?
I mean, it makes sense to me. I couldn't tell you any statistics around it though.
I actually came across a study when I was doing all my research, and I can't remember the details, but I think it was a 20% difference, that 20% more vaginally born babies breastfed than C-section.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, 20% less were successful breastfeeding who were born C-section.
Yeah.
And that could be because of the lack of hormones released with the C-section, correct?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know what the study includes, but I would assume we know for sure that babies born at home are going to be born vaginally. Cesarean isn't a choice. But babies born at the hospital could be either cesarean or vaginal. So you could see how having a home birth and having that kind of support of midwives who are coming to you, frequently could give you a leg up in terms of breastfeeding success rates, which could tip the scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. The study I read was just vaginal versus C-section, not home birth versus C-section. So I think the rate of success would be even higher for home birth because of all that support.
Yeah.
Definitely. Can you talk about some of the negative side effects of a C-section? You talked about a little bit, but maybe also about how after a C-section, you have decreased chance of having a VBAC successfully, the increased chance of uterine rupture, the side effects of scar tissue for the woman, things like that.
Yeah, all of those things. I mean, there is risk to all your organs, that are nearby, damage to your bladder, damage in terms of scar tissue and pain, like lifelong pain. There is a risk to the baby of like getting nicked, or having, nerve damage being born. On a personal level, my daughter almost died after her C-section. Luckily, I'm pretty sure we've talked about on the podcast, but we snuck a chiropractor in who adjusted her atlas. But because her atlas was off, her lungs had collapsed because those nerves that were running to her lungs weren't functioning. So any sort of extreme manipulation with a baby like that can cause damage to the baby and any part of their body. Yeah, not to mention that, the separation from mom, the higher NICU stay, lower APGARs, all that leads to being away from mom more, even if it's just a standard time away from mom, while she's being sewn up and things like that. With a vaginal birth, usually babies go straight to chest.
Yeah, it really bothered me that the doctors spoke about how C-section would be safer for my baby, but they didn't talk about all the risks of a C-section for my baby or for me or the future of my family, baby number 2.
Yeah, you just have to read that in the document you sign. They're like, talk about the benefits, and then they, usually if you're going to have a C-section, they just like briefly go over it before you head in.
Yeah, so back to the birth story, the labor. I was laboring on the bed in hands and knees, leaning over an inflated birth ball that my husband had pumped up. He said he was sweating. It was so hot. He was like manually pumping up this birth ball that I had that we hadn't inflated yet. And so I was leaning over that on the bed, and then they encouraged me to move to the toilet for a power position. And things started to get really close at this point. So I was able to squat, kind of stand up above the toilet, squat down and push. And the baby's bottom started coming out, but then it would go back up, and then it would come down, rock down, and then go back up. And at this point, the certified nurse midwife said to me, "You're having this baby here." I was so excited because she could see the bottom coming out. And she said, "At this point, you're having this baby at home." And I was just elated. So I pushed for a total of 2 hours, like starting on the bed and then, finishing in the toilet room. And once the baby's bottom was staying out of me, they suggested I turn around, have my husband sit on the toilet with a pillow that didn't have a pillowcase, and lean on his lap on the pillow and push that way. And then the midwives were the team was outside of the toilet room behind me. And I pushed for a while in that position. At one point, they suggested a runner's squat, like a half kneel. So one knee up and one knee down. And it was this position where she came out all the way in one contraction. So she was Frank Breech. So her bottom and legs came out first. The legs flopped down. And then I remembered my friend, the original one who encouraged me and taught me about home birth, who had her kids at home, who's now a midwife. She had
Hmm.
encouraged me to get that head out, like to not delay as soon as I felt the urge to push, to kind of quickly push that head out and not stall. So once the body was out, the certified nurse midwife said to me, now your uterus might think it's done and your contractions may feel less strong because most of the baby is out of you. So go ahead and keep pushing if you want to. And I did. I just pushed her head out. And so the whole body came all the way out in one contraction. She didn't need any maneuvers. The certified nurse midwife was ready with a bowl of olive oil to reach in and extract her if need be. But my baby's position was perfect. Her arms were crossed in front of her chest. I heard the certified nurse midwife say cleavage. I see cleavage, which is a good sign that her arms were crossed and down, not above her head. And she came out beautifully. The certified nurse midwife did not put her hands on her at all. She actually missed catching her, which she was embarrassed at, but it was like totally fine because I was just a couple feet off the ground and there was towels and pads under me and everything. But she was thinking about helping bring down one of the baby's hands so that she didn't cause a tear with her little hand. And she didn't think I was going to push out the head at that time. She thought I was going to wait a little bit. And so the baby just came out and landed on the floor totally fine. And they handed her under my legs to my husband and I, where we enjoyed her for a few moments. And then I laid back down on the floor and they put my daughter on her chest. I remember looking at her face and thinking, wow, she's so beautiful. And her eyes were open. She was bright-eyed. She was alert. She was looking around like, where am I? She took her first breath on her own quite quickly. She didn't need any supports to begin breathing. And I was just in love.
Mm, so beautiful. And you
Then,
made that happen.
yeah, I was so elated. I was like, we did it. After all this stress and all these decisions and all this research, we did it and it turned out beautifully. And I knew she didn't have lack of oxygen to her brain, because I was there for the whole thing and I saw her take her first breath right away and she was alert. And I knew that nothing had happened to her and that she was unharmed from me deciding to deliver her breech. And I had been worried about that because I'm a pediatric occupational therapist. I work with children who have special needs, some of whom have lack of oxygen to the brain. And so that's the last thing I would want to do intentionally to a child. And I would have felt so bad if I had caused that. But like I said, after all the research and talking to people and looking into it, I had learned that it was safe. It's just this study that was not done well, that was, in our opinion, incorrect about the safety of a vaginal breech birth.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. It's so, the sad part of your story is how hard you had to work to have this experience only because of where you live.
Yeah.
Like that, if you say Idaho, let's just go there. It wouldn't have even been, maybe an extra little bit of a conversation, about your comfort level and all that. But you wouldn't have had to spend so much money and fight so hard, to have this experience that if you hadn't been told that this was dangerous, it might not have even crossed your mind, like if we were like your daughter maybe growing up and hearing this story, that just to like normalize it and take the fear out of it, like what a service that will be for her.
Yeah. And our original midwife believed in breech vaginal birth, and she would have loved to have had been my provider for the breech birth, but her hands were tied because of the California law and her license being on the line. She had attended breech training with Dr. Stu, so she was knowledgeable about it, but she hadn't had any experience with breech birth because of the law. She
Yeah.
hadn't attended any breech birth, so she was honest and upfront that she didn't have experience with it hands-on. And my birth was the first breech birth she got to attend. So that was really cool for her. But if Breech was okay for midwives to attend in California, she probably would have been experienced with it.
Yeah.
And then it would have been
You just,
possible and gone well if it was legal and everything.
yeah, you just would have had your baby the way you just did, except with all the extra drama around it.
Yeah, yeah, without all of that.
Mm,
And our original midwife told us that breech is a variation of normal. Would you agree?
yes. Yes, it is.
That
Um,
breech isn't a problem. And I think Dr. Stu
yeah.
has a podcast about that where he says breech isn't a problem.
Yes. Yeah. He was saying, like, as a provider, if, you came to somebody pregnant and were having issues with, we'll just say your kidneys, they would send you to a specialist, and he was like, why don't they do that with breech or with twins? Like, why don't they say, instead of saying that it's too high risk or something, say, I'm not trained in this, I don't have experience with this, and let me send you to somebody who does, because there
Yeah.
are people out there who are trained and experienced and comfortable with it, and so why not send them to a provider who can support them instead of just saying, I guess we'll just cut you open.
Exactly. And I appreciated that our original licensed midwife was honest and upfront that she hadn't attended any breech births. We really appreciated that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Oh, well, what an amazing experience, and what a it sounds like a lifelong journey in such a short amount of time.
thank you. And the story isn't over yet, actually. So after my daughter was born, we had the placenta,
Yes.
and my husband was holding our daughter, Zoe, and it was time to birth the placenta. The certified nurse midwife began just the very gentle traction, and my placenta was right at the edge of being birthed,
Mhm.
and the cord broke off my placenta.
Oh.
And the certified nurse midwife looked at my original midwife with a look like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And I had watched a video of a triplet birth
Mhm.
where this happened and the midwife did a manual extraction. So I knew exactly what was going on. And my husband, he didn't watch that video, but he had, I don't know, read about it or heard about it. He knew what was going on too. And the certified midwife looked at me and said, I'm sorry. And I said, do it.
Yeah.
And she went in, and right about the same time, my original midwife who was assisting grabbed shots of Pitocin and gave me 2 shots of Pitocin in my leg. The certified nurse midwife brought her hand in, scooped out my placenta. It all came out. There was nothing left inside. It went really well. And she was like, I'm so sorry. And I said, don't be, you thank you for doing that. And I had heard that it was really painful and it did hurt, but honestly, it wasn't any worse than the rest of childbirth. So
Mhm.
it was really not a big deal to me, and it was so quick.
Oh, good. Because I had that experience personally too.
Oh,
It was definitely, in my memory, way worse than labor for me.
oh.
So I am so grateful that it wasn't for you. And how soon after giving birth did that happen?
I want to say about 15 minutes. Do you remember, John? Or five?
So pretty
5
soon
minutes.
after.
Yeah, sorry, about 5
Mine
minutes
was
after.
definitely like many, many hours later. As kind of
Oh.
like a last ditch effort before we went to the hospital. My bleeding was fine. It was just kind of like, well, you can't keep the placenta forever. Like, it has to come out eventually. So that was something we tried. But so I know my cervix had kind of like started to close, and maybe that is what led to it feeling, more painful.
That makes sense. Yeah, it was 5 minutes after the baby came out that the
Yeah, so you were
placenta.
probably already like, I've already just done this. So
Yeah, it was quick. It hurt, but it was quick. And I was just thankful that she was trained and, able to do that and take care of it all. And I didn't hemorrhage after that or anything.
beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. And my baby nursed within 45 minutes. It was just a wonderful experience. They weighed her, and my husband and I just laid in our bed and watched the whole thing. They measured her, and it was just this beautiful, calm, happy, joyous experience. My midwife, my original midwife, the assistant, went downstairs and made tea for my peri bottles and my bath, and she bathed me and cleaned me up, and she made tea for me to drink that at that time, and also the next day. She cut up my placenta and froze it for me so that my husband could make me smoothies with, we called them placenta meatballs.
Cute.
So I consumed my placenta over the course of the next 2 weeks in these delicious smoothies that he made me. My original midwife had suggested putting orange juice in them to help mask any kind of blood taste, and that really, really worked. I thought I might have a hard time mentally consuming my placenta that way, but I didn't at all.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and we just loved it. My husband agreed that he loved being at home. It was so nice to be able to eat and just be able to do things, and then to be able to be in our own bed after the birth with our baby. It was just a really, really special time.
Beautiful. And breastfeeding was
Breastfeeding has gone extremely well.
great.
My original midwife did our 6 postpartum visits at home. We loved those. She was so supportive and really was helpful with lactation consulting and helping me get that going right away. And we just loved having her visit, and we didn't have to drive anywhere. It was so nice. And when you give birth at a hospital, you get some support in the hospital while you're there right after the birth, but then that's it, right? You don't get any postpartum
Yeah,
visits.
I mean, they suggest you bring the baby in around day 3 and then you around 6 weeks so they can tell you can have sex again. But
Yeah,
it's not, I wouldn't call it support. We always joke that like, yes, 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 the birth is wonderful, but postpartum, that's where the magic is for home birth midwifery, you know?
absolutely. We loved having her come over. We looked forward to the visits. She was so helpful every time. It was so nice not to have to drive anywhere. She had recommended that I stay horizontal for the first 5 days. And then I'm sure you've heard, 5 days in the bed, 5 days on the bed, 5 days around the bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, my midwife had encouraged me to lay low to heal my pelvic floor properly, and we did that. I can't imagine getting in a car and driving to an appointment when she's 3 days old. That's wild to me.
Yeah, it's only because they feel like they can't afford to send people out to homes. That's why they keep you for 24 hours too, because there's testing that is offered around 24 hours and they don't have the funds to send people to homes, and it would be really irresponsible to ask somebody to come back in 24 hours. So they just keep you at the hospital.
Wow. Yeah. It was so nice not to be at a hospital after the birth. I can't imagine being there for a day or 3 days or whatever, and my husband sleeping on some uncomfortable couch and me being in a hospital. It was just so nice to be at home and be comfortable. It was lovely.
Mm, Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your whole journey. And I am so glad that you held to your vision. And how's your husband feel about the home birth experience now?
Really good. He highly recommends it to anyone who wants it and is a good candidate for it. He talks about the high level of care from the midwives, how much better it was than doctors. And we had done simultaneous care for a little bit prenatally, and just the level of care with the midwives really exceeded the level of care from the doctors. And then especially, considering the postpartum, my husband was very impressed with the high level of care from our original midwife postpartum and how that experience was. And we will definitely be doing a home birth again, breech or cephalic. No matter what, unless, of course, there's a real reason to transfer it to the hospital, then we will.
A real reason, not these made up laws.
Yeah. Thank you so
Aw,
much for having me on your podcast.
and if anyone wants to reach out and connect with you, is there a way they can reach you?
Yeah, my email address is amyodle@gmail.com. That's AMYOETTLE@gmail.com. They could also find me on Facebook or Instagram. Amy Odle should come up if they search my name.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amy.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks everybody for listening. You can find us at Born Wild Podcast on Instagram. For inquiries or feedback, you can email us at bornwildpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me, Emma Ray, on Instagram at Emma Ray, REA. Sophia at sophiabirth.com.
And me, Leah, at Bay Area Home Birth.
We would really appreciate it if you would rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps us reach more people. And as always, stay wild.